deterrence factor here, that being that her mother may very well be imprisoned herself if her daughter breaks the conditions under which she was released by the judge today. The judge telling her today that her rights under the Constitution are why she has a lawyer, one good enough to get her out of jail and sent home while she awaits trial for these alleged crimes. The judge telling her that the Constitution is why she's presumed innocent. And even if she and the other alleged Capitol attackers were waging war on that Constitution by trying to install a president by force, the Constitution would prevail anyway. Prevail against that kind of an attack, and the Constitution will, in fact, prevail over the means by which we as a country have to now deal with those who tried to set fire to it. Welcome to day one. We all lived through a president who was assisted in his elevation to the White House by illegal assistance from a hostile foreign power, which he welcomed. He was impeached twice. He was thrown out of office after one term. His supporters then mounted a violent and deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol to try to keep him in power. So yeah, now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45. I mean, we start our coverage tonight of the first full day of the Biden administration, but we admittedly have to do it with a little bit of sort of bifurcated vision. I mean, the new White House team, the new administration, has clearly taken the wheel with confidence, with what seems to be quite assured knowledge of where they intend to go, and they appear to know most of how they're going to get there. This is not a bunch of play actors or amateurs or people learning government for the first time from something other than Schoolhouse Rock. These are people who know government and, by and large, who have worked at high levels in government before. And they have lots of what you might call low-hanging fruit to pick in terms of policy, in terms of obvious, clearly needed, meritorious, non-controversial policy that the last administration just left hanging. So, yeah, duh, we need a national strategy to get Americans vaccinated. We need one of those. That's low-hanging fruit because we didn't have one of those things before. Quote, Biden and his advisors are inheriting no coronavirus vaccine distribution plan to speak of from the Trump administration. One of the biggest shocks the Biden team had to digest during the transition period was a complete lack of a vaccine distribution strategy under former President Donald Trump, even weeks after multiple vaccines were approved for use in the United States. One source telling CNN, quote, there is nothing for us to rework. We are going to have to build everything from scratch. So yeah, duh. A country with the worst coronavirus epidemic on Earth, a country that now has multiple vaccines available to it, yeah, that country, duh, should have a national vaccination program of some kind. But apparently the Biden team is having to build that now from jump because the outgoing administration never thought to do that. That's what's called low-hanging fruit in terms of policy aims. And yes, we need COVID help to schools and small businesses that have been moving heaven and earth on their own without help to adapt and adapt and adapt and adapt and try to stay open and operating under pandemic conditions. Yeah, duh, let's do that stuff and right away. And even on national security, it is low-hanging fruit. I mean, if the previous administration had not been so bizarrely and insistently supplicant to Russia, we would have had the Director of National Intelligence doing an assessment, for example, for the administration on the huge cyber attack, the huge SolarWinds cyber attack on the U.S. government within the last few months. Reportedly the worst cyber attack on the United States in history. Had we not had such a weird administration when it came to Russia for the past 4 years, you might expect that the intelligence community would be working on trying to assess responsibility for that and how to handle it, how to respond. Also, do you remember the reporting that Russia paid bounties to Taliban fighters and other fighters in Afghanistan? Russia paid cash rewards to those fighters for them killing U.S. troops in Afghanistan. You will recall that President Trump never raised that issue, never objected to that at all with Russia, never seemed bothered by it, never seemed to care. So yes, now, belatedly, the newly sworn-in Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, has been tasked with assessing Russia's culpability for that as well. And this is the most basic, most fundamental, most bottom-line national security stuff. Direct attacks on the American government and on Americans in uniform that were never defended against by the previous president, that he in fact ignored and thereby excused. Attacks on the United States that he allowed to happen. When it comes to national security strategy, there isn't much lower hanging fruit than that. So that will now change, right? This is not complicated stuff. There isn't any high-level complex decision-making that needs to go into starting stuff like this. Duh, we should figure out how to vaccinate the country. And yeah, we shouldn't let a hostile foreign government attack us and kill our soldiers with impunity, without us doing anything about it, not even raising objections to it. This is like, ask a 5-year-old what's good stuff for the government to do. And so this is one level at which we are watching the news in our country. The outgoing administration was so incompetent and so indifferent to the very basic responsibilities of governance, including the defense of the United States, that the first stuff they need to do, you can't believe wasn't already being done. The first stuff they have to do is like, to call it ABC is unfair to the alphabet. So that is part of what we are watching. It's such a radical shift from one day to the next. And, you know, and on personnel, the Biden administration has picked its nominees for top jobs, and there's not one of them among them who's like a friend of the family wedding planner who's now in charge of housing in the whole Northeast, or a former talent booker for the Cartoon Network who's been installed at the CDC as CDC chief of staff during a fatal pandemic. That really is a thing that happened. At the White House insistence, they installed a new CDC chief of staff who was a booker for the Cartoon Network. For real. I mean, if you think about it, the talent for the Cartoon Network is like cartoons. How hard is it to book them? Don't you just draw them? The new administration's nominees appear by and large to be competent, non-controversial experts and respected public servants. It's shocking. This is their first full day that they are on the job, and they are already working on what appears to be the stuff you'd expect them to be working on, the things Joe Biden said during the campaign and during the transition that he would work on and work on from day one. And so day one, here's our 200-page national COVID strategy and the executive orders to start implementing it. Right? Those executive orders that were ready to go, not even on the first full day, but within minutes of the inauguration. It appears that none of those will immediately be thrown out by federal courts because they were lawyered by, like, the president's son-in-law and the editor from Breitbart, who once made that movie that one time about how much the old guy from Duck Dynasty looks like Jesus if you squint. No, they had actual lawyers do the legal stuff. So that's a new hard thing to get used to. That's part of our new field of vision. Experts like the guy who used to coordinate the international military effort against ISIS, who was inexplicably fired by Donald Trump recently, Biden has brought him back.